Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here this afternoon with Laura Mounsey. She's the Director and Solicitor at Harrogate Family Law here in North Yorkshire. And today we're going to have a conversation, hopefully, and it's going to cover how to get the best out of your meetings with your divorce solicitor. Both emotionally and practically. So myself, I'm Jessica Roy Coaching, and I'm a breakup and divorce coach here in North Yorkshire as well. So between us, we're hoping to cover both of those angles. So thank you so much for joining me today, Laura. I know you're really busy today, so thank you.
No problem.
So to help our clients, some people have asked me at the point where they're thinking about divorce and they're looking to instruct a solicitor for the very first time, is there any sort of thing that they should be looking for that helps them realize whether it be a good fit for them?
That's a good question, and I think I'm glad you brought that up, because many people, I think, don't know what they want or need in a lawyer, or even want and need at the point that they're deciding to separate, because that whole thing is so uncertain, and it's really difficult when you're dealing with those very intense emotions to think clearly sometimes. So I think a key thing to start with is that people need to remember that lawyers work for them. It's not the opposite way round. And in my experience, people like people who are like themselves. And really, anyone who's thinking about getting divorced needs to think about, who is it that I can trust? Who is it that I feel really gets what I'm worried about, and I feel understands what it is I need them to fix? Because people know lawyers, whichever one you get, they're not cheap at all. So the least you would hope to get out of that is that you are shifting that burden and all those things that keep you up at night to someone who knows how to sort out your future so that you can focus on trying to, be a good parent, keep your job down, and also just start to rebuild yourself a bit and rebuild your life. So, for example, a lot of people come to me because they are worried about whether enough is enough and whether they even are entitled to decide that actually they don't want to be a part of this marriage anymore. People who come to me tend to be someone who is quite fearful of their ex. They don't feel like they can have a sensible conversation with them, or that they're likely to be manipulated in some way or made to feel like the bad guy, and they're going to be the person yet again who is going to, take responsibility. They're going to be the person to make concessions. And that's really dangerous if you don't have the right person on your side who can tell you, what you're entitled to and to go get what you deserve. So you feel like, I don't know, that it's worth the fight and that there is a fight that you can win. So that tends to be, where on earth am I going to live? How on earth am I going to pay for everything because he won't give me a penny? And those are the type of people that gravitate towards me. And I say that as someone who is a child of parents who had a very similar power dynamic, I would say, when they got divorced. But I'm not for everyone. And I think a lot of people perhaps feel bad about being honest and saying, do you know what? You're not really my cup of tea. Some people need someone who's much more low key than I am. And that's fine. The last thing you want to do is feel like you're fighting your lawyer and also fighting your ex. So I think it's important before someone goes to a first meeting that they think about what is really important to them in a lawyer. And even if they just think about, what's really important to their friend group or who they decide to have as their friend, is probably a very similar criteria, to be honest, because you would hope that most lawyers only get to this position because we know what we're talking about. So, it's nothing to fear. And people shouldn't feel intimidated by saying, do you know what, actually, you're not for me.
That's really interesting and probably refreshing for some people to hear, actually, that can be the case, and that they have that sort of ownership on their choices really with that. Is it about then them sort of going with before that first meeting, is there anything that can help them sort of feel a little bit more prepared? For example, is it a case that they maybe just write down a few questions, important questions, or a few of the matters that they really want to cover? What would you suggest for that first meeting for clients?
I think they should honestly bullet point the things that are keeping them up at night. Often in my experience, when I first speak to someone, if they call and ask to speak to me, I think sometimes they almost feel under pressure to ask the questions that they think that I want them to ask me, about what am I entitled to and how long is it going to take? When actually sometimes those aren't the things that are really bothering them. Sometimes it's like, I'm absolutely terrified of never seeing my children again. And that is just as important. And if that's the thing that's like really, really freaking you out, then we need to talk about that first. So I would bullet point the things that, you're constantly having to bring up with your friends, the things that are giving you nightmares, and I would prioritize them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that you come away from that first meeting feeling like you have a plan to deal with those things that are currently blocking you from even being able to visualize any future past, I don't know, the next hour. I think also it helps if people do call around a couple of different lawyers, because we're all very, very different. And sometimes you just click with someone and you don't know why, but you wouldn't be able to compare and contrast unless you've had conversations with more than one person. And I've had so many people instruct someone and then have to swap lawyers like mid-case because they just realize that it's just not something that fits at all. And that in itself, I think, is quite traumatizing, because you hope that once you pick your lawyer, that's like the beginning of the end and where things start to get better. And it's truly horrifying if things get worse, as opposed to, being that sanctuary that you hope that they will be.
Absolutely. I think that's really great advice, to kind of definitely look around at some different and speak to people, because it's like you say, it's that relationship that's going to go over time that you're going to build, and tell them a lot of really personal details about yourself, that has to feel right. And that's quite empowering to know that it's good to be able to choose at the beginning, but also to think, I don't want to get so far down this process, because presumably you have to start again from the beginning if you're going somewhere else, to your law. Is that correct?
Yeah, it often costs you more money. And because it will take any new lawyer some time to read into your case and get their head around, what has been solved, what are the problems that still need to be sorted out, it can leave you feeling very vulnerable and panicky at like one of the most crucial points, because you're probably still feeling like you're nowhere near getting out of this with your ex. And also the person that you did think was on your team and was the person to get you out of this living nightmare, you're now having to sack them off, and you're putting all of your trust and whatever remaining energy you have in a new person. And you're probably pretty scared that you might get it wrong a second time. But in any event, it's going to take them quite a while to kind of get on the same page as you again, because it's a completely new relationship. So it is something, because you're making some of the biggest decisions at one of the worst times of your life, it is important to just take that step back. Sometimes at the end of a first client meeting, I know that lawyers will ask people to make a decision there and then about, do you want to instruct me or not? And you might not be the type of person who makes a decision like that. You might be someone who actually likes to sleep on it, or you like to call your mum and talk it through. In which case, go to that meeting knowing that you will not be backed into a corner to make a decision that you might later regret. Because if you're going to leave someone, it's all about taking back that control. And it's really important that you feel in control in the relationship that you have with your lawyer. Otherwise, you're just perpetuating exactly what you're trying to free yourself from. So it's not easy, and it's very easy for me to sit here and say it. But I just want people to be more empowered as opposed to intimidated by lawyers, because we don't know it all at all.
Yeah, and I just think, again, it's just really refreshing, I think, that for people to hear, because I think, you know, for the layperson who doesn't know what you almost going to somebody who you think has all the answers, and you're just going to go, yes, and but I think what you're telling people is, you know, go prepared with make a little bit of preparation about what you want to get out of it. And I think in terms of what I experience with my clients is, it's a very emotional process, and some of my clients sort of talk about the fact that they struggle to feel ready emotionally as well, and they might go, and you've already said, Laura, that it's an expensive time going to see your lawyer, and you know, if you spend your meeting crying, that can be, you know, quite difficult for then you to come away and think, oh, not only did I not get across what I wanted to say, but also I think I've just racked up more and more bills. So you know, there are tools that we can do as well, that, you know, to really dial down your emotion, and just that sort of little bits of preparation you can put in beforehand to think, I'm just going to put the anger aside for it, almost like a prayer. I'm going to put the anger aside for this. I'm going to put the emotion to one side for a bit, just to talk about what I need and what I want out of this this experience. But just to reassure anyone who's not been for that first appointment, Laura, what kind of thing should they expect as their first appointment? And just to reassure people that it's okay.
Yeah, I often wonder what people think like a new meeting is going to look like. And obviously I can only speak for myself, because I know lots of different firms do it in different ways. I mean, a lot of firms, even when you first call up and maybe first utter the words to someone and admit it out loud that you think you want a divorce, you might be speaking to the secretary as opposed to someone who actually can help you. So as far as a first meeting is concerned, it can happen. Well, I'm personally quite flexible in terms of how that meeting happens. So, you know, if someone wanted to do it by video and that was more comfortable for them or easier with like childcare, I can do that. I can even do it over the phone. Sometimes I've even spoken to people, you know, whilst they're sat in their car on a lay-by, because that's the only time they feel safe to have that conversation. Or they'll come into the office and they'll get a nice cup of tea or coffee, sometimes biscuits, and I'll do my best to help them feel at home. And one of the things I will always say to someone, which is that I'm not there to sell them on a divorce, and I'm not there to sell them on me either. The first meeting really should be, in my view, a chance for someone to take a step back and talk to someone who doesn't care what they do, provided that they have the space to decide what the right thing is for them to do next. And if that requires a lawyer and that requires some action through a lawyer, fine. But it's certainly not, you know, like a sales pitch where you go and you're going to get a new car and you're like hounded into, you must get this car and you must get this car at this place. So I will usually have a good note of what I've spoken to them about on the phone before they even come in to meet with me. So in that phone call, when they first call here, I'll always make sure that I've got down, you know, at least 3 things that are really bothering them, that they need to talk about and they need a plan for. So I will come to that meeting with at least those 3 things. And sometimes, since we've spoken and they've come to this meeting, there's another 3 things that actually they've thought of that they want to add on. So I'll add that on. And a big one of those worries will always tend to be legal fees. So I'll always talk about that, and they get to watch me look very uncomfortable because I hate talking about that bit. And the meeting will just involve me asking them quite a lot of questions, to be honest, which I do warn them about. And from those questions, we tend to end up deciding whether they think it's something they need a lawyer's help with, and if they do, whether I'm the right person for them. And if so, through our questioning and our kind of conversation backwards and forwards, we'll end up concluding what a good plan is to sort out those 3 worries that they have, the 6 worries that they have. And at the end of the meeting, all they really need to decide is whether they want to move forward with that plan or not. And I think sometimes people come to a meeting not even knowing what they're going to be asked to decide, if that makes sense.
So would you say then, Laura, if you've spoken to somebody before and you've planned a meeting, would you expect them to give you some hints as to what to bring to that meeting? Is that a valid expectation of a lawyer to sort of suggest what you might need to bring to that meeting?
I find very rarely do I need someone to actually bring anything tangible, because I can usually work out a plan just by talking with them.
Yeah,
to be honest. It's always good if they have an idea, for example, about, you know, what they think they would like to happen with the house, whether they would be able to survive financially on their own if, say, their ex didn't pay them any kind of ongoing payment. So it's good if they think about those sorts of things, because then we can kind of triage what's like a real problem that needs like urgent attention and what things maybe aren't an issue for them, in which case, why spend time and money talking to a lawyer about them if actually you think they're handled or they're totally fine. So I tend to just ask people to come with an open mind, really, and to feel comfortable with being honest with me, which I think, again, sometimes people find a bit difficult because you're talking to a stranger about, you know, some of your deepest, darkest secrets that not even your family know or your friends know. So I try to keep it as low key as possible because it's such an overwhelming time. So the only things they actually need to decide in a meeting are, do they want me to be their lawyer? And if so, what's our plan?
Yeah.
Those are only the 2 things. Sometimes that becomes 3 things if, for example, I'd say at least 1 in 3 people come to that first meeting not sure about whether they do think it's over or not. So they might, by the end of the meeting, have made a decision about that. Or if they haven't, fine. But we need a plan for how they are going to work that out. And for example, I might suggest that they work with you because I can't make that decision for them. And it might be something more emotional that they need to work on with expertise that I do not have, that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, you know, our conversations and our work together is really valuable in terms of, you know, you've got that absolute staying in the lane for the legal, and myself very emotional. And I don't, I think it's brilliant listening to all this. And I think certainly some of the clients who I've had in the past just haven't had that clarity. And I think particularly clarity is so key when you go, when you talk about control and gaining control, clarity can be a really key part of getting that control. So having that clarity about the legal process and what it might start to look like for you is really helpful. So
exactly. I mean, I've had people who probably, you know, through no fault of their own, and they're very strong people, they probably haven't made a decision, or at least an important decision of their own volition for 30 years, 40 years. And here I am, you know, asking them to potentially make some of the most life-changing decisions ever when they probably feel, I don't know, at their lowest, or at least close to that. And, you know, that takes a lot of energy. So anyone who sits in an office with a lawyer has, you know, my utmost respect and admiration. But like you and I've talked about before, because of what happened with my parents, you know, it's very easy, particularly if you're leaving a controlling relationship, that you're very vulnerable as part of the separation to being railroaded back into that same vortex of control and manipulation. And if you don't have the right people around you, whether that be professional or not, that you feel safe communicating with about some of the buttons that are being pressed by that person, you risk throwing in the towel, thinking that removing that short-term but horrific, very, very intense emotion is worth it. You risk later down the line ending up in a position where you can't do anything about it. You have massive regrets, and frankly, without wanting to be over dramatic, you don't have somewhere to live and you can't pay for everything you need to pay for. And I'm not saying that to scaremonger, I'm saying that because I've seen it happen. And it happened in my life because the lawyer didn't know about what was happening emotionally down on the ground, and the people in my life didn't have someone like you to help them have that clarity and to build that resilience so that they could at least communicate that there was a problem that was clouding their judgment. And I would never forgive myself if I asked someone to make, you know, a very critical decision as part of my job if I didn't know that they weren't in the right space to be making that decision. So thank goodness you do what you do.
Yeah, brilliant. Do you know, I've really enjoyed this short conversation with you, and I think the aim was hopefully to provide a little bit more clarity for the clients we both work with, and I really hope it's done that for everybody this afternoon. So thank you so much, Laura, for spending a bit of your busy day with me. It's been fantastic, and I would say to anybody who sees this, if you thought it was useful, please let us know. And also, if there's any questions you'd like me and Laura to cover in a future chat that you think would be helpful to you, please do let us know those as well. But thank you very much, everybody, for watching this afternoon.
Thank you.